Welcome to Office Hours, everyone. This is the place. We answer your media and tech-related production questions every single day. Courtney Gooden from Los Angeles is our reader today. Courtney, what's up to start this new session?
Good morning, Bill. First up from Portsmouth, Maine, I believe, Harold Williams says there appears to be a trend of sharing event highlights on social media, especially given the prevalence of AI in these platforms. I wonder if this will ultimately replace live streaming longer form content. Any thoughts?
Jesse Kester, start us out with your impressions.
Oh, quite the opposite. These are designed to be a gateway drug that gets you into the longer form content.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. Ronnie Hopsaway, out in Tromsø, Norway, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is something we see in all levels of society. I think the young ones, I have 4 kids, and they were born from 2000 to 2006, and grew up with the iPad minis and phones, etc. And I see that in a Saturday evening setting with some dinner, nice things in the glasses, and all family sitting together in the living room, watching a movie is impossible. They all say, yes, let's see a movie for 90 minutes, and they last maybe 15 minutes, 20 at the most. So I think this is also some of the reasons why films in theaters is slowly fading away. And it's kind of a sad thing to see that the young ones are so short in their focus. So the focus, the really focus on one thing is really getting shorter and shorter for every year. And I see this I see this as a problem. And I think we are not getting rid of it. So we just have to live with it, I think.
Mark Giuliani.
So I agree with both Jesse and Ronnie. I think that different people want to see different things. So some people want to sit down and enjoy long-form conversations, and other people want the shorter form of that conversation and maybe just chunks of little, protein. But I think that the way to really get to everyone is to take these little shorts and put them out on social media. And if people want to hear more about it, you pull them into the longer form.
CJ.
And from what we've seen at Las Vegas, even with our coverage on Sunday, live is hard. The shorts are a lot easier. And so when you're in a bandwidth-starved environment, speaking specifically to NAB, when you're in a bandwidth-starved environment and you don't have the infrastructure to support, taking a live crew through something, you're going to gravitate towards what's a little easier. That said, the shorts are not going to build a community in the way that a live will. And the shorts may get you eyeballs, but when we are able to execute on the live interaction of the community with folks on the floor, that's when you go to a different place. And that's what I think we saw even in some of the stuff that we did in after hours yesterday, where we got to walk up to a booth and say, hey, I'm here with 30 or 40 of my friends from all around the world. They have some questions, and the thing that I would have never thought to ask, but this time we do.
Oops, your signal's getting a little bit. That's live from the field. That's what you get into. Yeah. I'm reminded of what Liberty White said in one of her first ones. I think we've adopted it. Snackable content. People want both. They, in this world of young people particularly, but everybody now swiping through things, and does it attract your attention? How long does it keep you there? Those short form little hits are very critical for getting people to stop on something. But I just followed one this morning. I saw a little piece of content. It came out of something that Elton John and Brandi Carlile did about the new record they're releasing together. And I was so enamored with the idea that I ended up spending too much time watching the actual full-length piece. So it was exactly, I think, what it's intended to do, which is the snackable thing that I saw going by drew me into the longer piece. The longer piece was also exceptionally interesting. And so I got stuck there for a while and didn't realize until far later than I should have that I had other commitments. So I had to get out and do the things I had to do before the show. And as a result of all that, I got in a little late. So that may be what we're looking at in the future. These little things that you see that draw you into the bigger things. Let's go to the next question.
Yeah, we used to call those trailers,
Yeah, that's right.
All right, the next one up comes from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. John asks, for some reason, QuickTime is freezing on my Mac Studio. Seems to happen on files from a Blackmagic Cloudstore device attached to the local network. Files are fine. In all NLEs are editing software ideas.
Courtney Gooden, what do you think?
Well, I don't have a Mac Studio, but I can have some ideas. And it depends. You just said QuickTime. And are you talking about the QuickTime player on your Mac Studio? If that's the case, that is not a very good player. And it's designed, and it depends on what type of QuickTime files are they. Are they 444 ProRes files with a QuickTime wrapper? If that's the case, they're fairly high bandwidth and coming over a network. What's the speed of your network? Is it 10 gigabit? Is it 1 gigabit? If it's 1 gigabit and you're trying to play, 444 ProRes, yeah, it could run into network congestion. Your switch may not be up to it to deliver the packets fast enough for the player to play without freezing because it runs out of buffer space and it can't get those packets in and lined up in time over the network. So check and see what type of files you're trying to play back in QuickTime over that network from the Blackmagic Cloudstore. And if you have a 10 gigabit, then it may be something else. If you're, connected via 10 gigabit network to your Cloudstore, you could try. If you have the Cloudstore, depends on whether you have the local Cloudstore or the cloud-based Cloudstore too. So there's a lot of questions about your question. That we would need to know a little more information to give you a guess as to where the congestion or where the problem is happening.
Ronnie Hofstra has some ideas here. Ronnie?
Yeah, to add to that, Courtney said, I'm also seeing or historically I've seen some problems loading really, really big files through the network. And as Courtney said, network congestion is probably one of the reasons. But back to the questions we have. So if you can answer those, we will probably be better off. Are you using this on an Intel Mac or on M1 Mac? What is your internet network connection? Is it 10, 1 or 10 gigabits? And I'm also wondering if you can have too little resources on your Mac. So memory or internal hard drive. And if this is an older iMac, you probably have a spinning drive. And if you have a spinning drive, I've seen those things happen frequently. So maybe if you have the option to come with more details, we will be able to answer more correctly.
Yeah, I think you're hearing it from a lot of us. Sometimes it's really dialing down to figure out what is the thing that's causing the delay. I'll never forget the first times that I was playing around with noise reduction in video, there was such a disconnect between I'm going to drop neat video, for example, on a file, and then I would come back and like a half an hour later, it was only 10% done. And I was going, why is this taking so long? Why is it so hard? But then eventually when I kind of understood more, I realized that plugin dropped on the file was trying to recalculate every pixel in a gigantic raster, figure out what was noise and what was content, and separate them out and make one better and eliminate the other. And it had to do that with literally billions and billions of pixels. And even a fast computer just took a huge amount of time to work through it. It's gotten a little bit faster and in some cases much faster with the GPUs and things we have now. But I never forgot the idea that I can take a simple action that can result in very complex asks from the computing system that I'm working with. Now you add network where you're trying to get that signal up into the cloud, process it there, and then get it back down to someplace else. And again, a simple ask can eat up a lot of bandwidth, and there's so many variables that it's really hard to figure where it's going wrong. But see if you can reformulate the question. Give us some more guessworthy data about how this is taking place, and we'll certainly try to solve it for you as best we can. Let's go on to our next question.
Next one comes in from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. In DaVinci Resolve, is there any way to create a global preset that affects all projects for Fairlight audio metering instead of having to change project settings every time I create a new project?
Ronnie Hosway, can you help him out?
Well, for ages, we've had this problem in not just DaVinci, but all other softwares as well that I can come to think of. And the way to fix that is just create a template file, which has all the settings you need and most of the times are using, and save that template file as a template file.final.v1. Ready for use. Do not delete.
With a green dot, so you know which one it is. Courtney.
Yeah, what Ronnie said. That you can find online. You can find people who did a bunch of YouTube videos on how to create a project template for DaVinci Resolve. So that's probably your solution. And make sure hopefully it includes all the Fairlight settings. So once you set your Fairlight settings in that template, save it to your hard disk and don't overwrite it. And you might have to change your project name every time you load it. But
Alexander, if you do this successfully, it will change your life. I remember when I finally understood this about Final Cut projects, and I had 6 templates for a particular client that had 6 different graphic looks and the rest of that. And if I started with the right one, I was like a football field of distance down the road the very first time I landed a clip on the timeline, because everything was as I expected it, and I could change based on the project. So yeah, templates are wonderful. Next question.
All right. Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas has a question. Paul asks, which GMKtec or a similar tiny computer has the most bang for the buck under $420 to be used for Zoom streaming and video editing with Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve 20?
Our tiny computer guru happens to be in residence here. Courtney Gooden, take it away.
Not a tiny guru. Here's a GMKtec Ryzen 7. It's the 8845HS mini PC Nook box. It's not as tiny as the one that I usually hold up here. These little bitty baby ones. Here it is. See, it's plugged in, so it's providing images for the show. So I can't wrestle it out of its little cubbyhole. Those are usually only Celerons, so they only have 4 cores. But the Ryzen, of course, has 8 cores and 16 threads, so it will pass the muster for Zoom streaming, as a to provide 1080p on Zoom, and it has enough bang for the buck with its AMD processor for handling the graphics for $389. So it beats your $420 by just a few bucks, and it should be okay for you. And you can upgrade it. You can upgrade the RAM. I think 16 gigabytes. I think this one can hold more than 16. I think they usually come with about 16 gigabytes of RAM, and you can expand the internal storage to a terabyte or 2 if you want of NVMe drive. So
don't forget this. Oh, excuse me. I thought you were done. Yeah. Don't forget this show is run on your questions. We're always taking them. You can ask your questions, both ask them and chat about them and vote on them in Mukata. That's our Q&A system. If you want to figure out how it works, go to officehours.global/join. We'll send you an email within a day or two. And once you've done the sign-up process, you can vote on and discuss the show's questions in our live show community in real time. There's always a great discussion happening in parallel with our show. So that's officehours.global/join. Next question.
Next one comes in from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington, who was anchoring the report of Extra Hours last night. We saw him there. And he asks, of all the new products and technology releases at NAB, what has your interest?
Jesse Kester is going to start us out. Jesse, what caught your attention?
It's no one product or technology. It's the confidence with which these companies are deploying their AI tools. It felt like last year every announcement was, here's a thing, plus AI, and this year they actually have tools that would actually be useful for production being shoehorned into their gadgets and gizmos.
Ronnie Hofsoy.
Yeah, I've been following, for instance, the tracking systems for active camera tracking that Sony has improved on the last year. I've seen different versions coming to the surface more and more, and now they demoed the FR7's tracking abilities, which are is revolutionizing how we do corporate events, at least. And they also have this other model with fixed lens as well, which has had this tracking and have been testing this out in the market already, and they are getting rave reviews. So this is one way where we could call it machine learning, but I think it's more AI than it's machine learning, because it really thinks ahead and are anticipating the movement of persons. It seems like it creates an internal 3D image of the person and knows that it's not going to move backwards, it's going to move forwards. And when it's turning, the camera is zooming slightly out and start moving the other way. So it's amazing to just watch how the AI is transforming or actually replacing camera operators, which probably is a good thing, because then we can have money to purchase more equipment. The other thing is that we see that Blackmagic is moving more and more into 2110, which is reassuring. We see that they are launching several products that are kind of being the ones that we need to glue together both old technology, baseband technology like SDI, etc., and connect that into the digital domain. And we also see, even as SDI is also digital, but on another cable. We also see that they are launching products that are really revolutionizing the audio de-embedding system, which was a thing on the second hour when they had this the Blackmagic launch video, and making it possible for editors to really take advantage of doing multi-channel audio editing and multi-channel video editing in a lower price class that we have been used to. They also try to do stuff that have never been done before, so I just wish them luck. A third thing is that we see technologies like WMAS from, for instance, Sennheiser, and they also have the similar technology from Shure and Sound Devices, which is utilizing the wireless or the radio bands in a more efficient way. And whereas there are different versions of this technology from each of these vendors, we see that Sennheiser is going two-way on these technologies. So you can have both, you can have a backpack on the artist, which is both IEM and the microphone transmitter. So these type of technologies are paving the way of how we're going to do practical stuff in the future, and this is really good news for us that do physical events as well as digital and hybrid events.
Courtney, what are your thoughts?
I didn't attend the show this year, but I did watch the extra hours and where Guy posed this of the four panelists, Grant and Jeff Keithley, and Blue and CJ was there. And basically the consensus of the table was, well, it was more evolutionary than revolutionary. There were a few new revolutionary products, but not every product, they were building AI into the new products, but they weren't touting it as like they were the year before. And there weren't really any super new, brand new products that really stood out. Mostly were improvements to last year's things that were introduced. So I'm not sure what would pique my interest. I think in maybe about 2 years, we're going to see robotic cameramen. You'll take the Boston Dynamics new Atlas and the Optimus Prime, and you'll just build a camera into their heads, because they can do that little chicken walk thing and walk very smoothly, and they don't have to hold a camera. It can be built into their head. So why not roaming, handheld cameraman? What used to be handheld cameraman, but now it's just a roving robot that is your camera, a little antenna on their head, and they transmit back. What could be simpler? Eliminate, of course, handheld cameramen and Steadicam operators all over the world are going to be out of work. But hey, that's progress.
I'm assuming there will be a time coming when we all have micro drones circling our heads that are always a POV that we carry with us. The world's crazy. Let's go on to the next question.
All right, next one comes from Alexander Knight, Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. I installed Davinci Resolve Studio 20 Beta, and I tested the new AI multicam feature on a new project. It took my ATEM ISO records and made an automatic multicam edit for me, and it looks pretty good. This is remarkable tech. Thoughts?
Jesse Kester, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I have a thought. Why aren't you on the panel today to expand on what this project was? Because I've got very specific questions. We're going in tomorrow to do a test of exactly what you just described, but I'd like to know how long your timeline was, how many cameras you were on, if you're using Blackmagic cameras and then switching from the H.264 generated in the board over to the RAWs in the camera, and what we can expect as we jump into the DaVinci Resolve timelines. Perhaps we can rendezvous on office hours next week and discuss our experiences with this new tech.
Please, that would be really exciting. Courtney Gooden, your thoughts?
Yeah, if you saw the demo that they did of DaVinci 20 that Grant did right before the show opened, yeah, it has amazing. It's basically video follows audio cuts, but there's a lot of AI involved in determining whose lips are moving to determine who to cut to. Not just it has to identify the audio, and it used to be. This type of feature was done where you had separate audio and separate tracks, and it just used the modulation on that particular track of audio to cut to the camera that was associated with that person. But I think the AI that has been added to the fact that it, figures out who's talking, even if you have a single track of audio with everybody mixed together. It can identify the voices, cut them apart onto separate channels, and then switch based on watching the cameras from each individual person associated with that audio and watching their lips move to see if they're the one that's actually talking, or maybe it's somebody off camera who's talking. Cut to a wide shot, or if it can't figure it out, to take some alternative method of cutting around what it's hearing. But it will be interesting to see how well it works if you guys get it working in a demo and if you do it with a single camera, or let's say a group shot of people sitting around a table, or a dais of people that are all speaking randomly, and it has to figure out who's speaking and cut to a close-up. Or even if you have a 4K, it could punch into, a 4K camera source. It could punch into a close-up in 1080p. That would be really cool.
It's fascinating technology. Roscoe Jones in the chat said, how good were the L cuts and J cuts, for those of you who might not be up with the editing term? That's where you cut to the audio before you cut to the video or cut to the video before you bring in the audio of that person. That's an editing technique that allows you to shift the focus a little bit as an editor between what is being said right now. And it's the opposite of see, hear, I'm going to cut to them when they're speaking, and then cut to the next person when they're speaking, and cut to the next person when they're speaking, which is fine. And sometimes that works really well. It always reminds me, and I'm going to digress here a little to the aesthetics of editing. It reminds me of marches versus jazz. And I say that because on marches, there's a pretty specific time thing. And one of the first hints to me that someone is a beginning editor is when they just cut on beats all the way through. And I didn't really understand that until I was listening to a recording of Frank Sinatra singing Witchcraft, which is an old classic standard. And for some reason, I had to break that song down, and I was realizing how much he either anticipated or lagged behind the actual tempo of the song in his phrasing. And I used to hear people say that Frank Sinatra was a master at phrasing. And that was one of the wake-up moments for me as an editor to say, there is a difference there can be a difference. You can impose a difference in the tempo between what you're seeing and what you're hearing in a way that is uniquely satisfying. And when the beat hit and he started the lyric a long bit after that and caught up in the middle of it, it really was a different kind of a flow that is in its own way brilliant. So I'm a great believer in these automated tools for rough cuts and for kind of blocking things out. What I hope is that people don't come to rely on them so much that they don't learn the jazz part of it and go beyond just marching band stuff. That's my 2 cents. I'm going to stop there and let's go on to the next question.
QR code question coming in from Steve Jackson in London in the United Kingdom. We're planning a live stream using Zoom events over RTMP. Would it be best to match cameras to the preferred frame rate of Zoom at 30 frames per second, or stick to the regional 25 frames per second and upscale with a decimator prior to encoding? IMAG may or may not be used.
Ronnie Hofsaway's got to try to help you out. Ronnie?
Well, it depends. This is PAL land, as we call Europe and parts of Asia as well. So 25 frames per second is what we are used to in PAL land. The other thing we are used to is 50 hertz for the lighting, and that's point one. If the lighting in the venue is classic lights with 50 hertz frequency, you will have huge problems using your camera at 30 frames per second. So follow the lights. That's rule number one. If you have full control over the lights and you can use like cinema lights or other professional lights, stage lights, which does not have this flickering problem, you can of course choose to have 30 frames per second. The other thing that then happens is if the projector or IMAG in the venue are running different frequencies, you should probably follow them again. So that's the second rule of thumb. The third thing is when you are encoding, some of the encoders have problems encoding 25 or 30 frames per second, or changing it to 30 frames per second, so basically upscaling the frequency or frame rate, and loses audio sync. That has happened before when we have full control over audio, when we have full control over the IMAG, etc. So the third thing is to watch what your encoder is able to do, and upscale that frequency. The fourth thing is that if you're choosing to use IMAG and you do not have reference sync going through the house or through all the equipment, there is a slight improvement in the latency if you increase to 60 or 50 frames per second instead of the 25 or 30 frames per second. So as long as you have a scaler or a resynchronizer, or what you call it, that can actually handle this and deliver something that is readable in a good way for Zoom, you should be good. And the fifth thing is that Zoom normally eats everything and re-encodes everything to whatever it needs.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, Ronnie hit all the high points there to watch out for, especially the IMAG may be the biggest problem that you will run into. Converting from 25 to 30 is one of the most problematic standards conversion problems because it can generate judder if you don't have because those frame rates don't go into each other evenly very well. And it can create any kind of smooth motion. You can see a little bit of a judder, a stutter, a frame repeated every now and then, which is kind of a problem. So if you could, if your lights are not a problem, and these days with LED lights, a lot of them are using high frequency pulse width modulation to do dimming. So they may not be a problem with 30 frames per second in a 50 hertz. They may be converting that 50 hertz to a high frequency and then using that to drive those LED lights. So flicker may not be a problem. If you've got old fluorescent tubes or something, yes, you're going to have a problem with 25 hertz and 30 frames per second. 25 hertz lighting and 30 frames per second camera shutter. But try it out beforehand. Check your lighting, see if you have any flicker issues. And if you don't, then I would suggest set your cameras to 30 for the upstream, because conversion And if you are going to convert, you do end up converting from 25 on the camera set to 25, converting and then uploading 30, is have a high end converter, standards converter that can take into account the differences between those two and divide it up so that you don't see the judder. Not just a low rent standards conversion, frame rate converter like a decimator. Go with a Teranex or something that is designed to do standards conversion between 25 and 29.97 or 30.
If you're enjoying office hours, don't forget we do have some extra shows that are starting to pop up around things. Extra Hours happens on Monday, and if you happened to watch it yesterday, it was coming to us live from NAB. It was fun. Grant Whitehead typically does that. On Thursdays, The Rundown. David Paskin hosts a panel that takes a deep dive into the why behind the latest tech that's reshaping our world. So those are just a couple of the shows, and we have more that are in planning and coming up, so Office Hours continues to expand that way. Let's go to our next question.
Another QR code question from Steve Johnson in Florida. He says, I have 4 HyperDecks and an ATEM 2 HD Constellation. Would it be safe to input timecode and genlock to one device, then loop out to the others?
Ronnie Hossoy, can you help us out?
So timecode and RefSync or these type of Genlock signals is kind of different. So let's talk about RefIn or Genlock signals. Normally, when I've done that, I used a Genlock generator or RefSync generator that has multiple outputs, and you can definitely send some different directions on the stage or in the venue. But it's said by Blackmagic to some extent that it's safe to just loop in and out other products. I have not tested how many products you can actually successfully loop in and out of. So I would just test it and see if it works. And if it works, it works.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, most of those products that have a reference in and a reference out reshape the signal, the reference signal as it goes through, so it reshapes it. So it keeps it in sync and squares it back up again as it goes to the next. And you can go through many of them. A lot of facilities go in and out, in and out, in and out. Or you could put a distribution amplifier in there for your tri-level sync and send that to each one of them. But you can loop through 2, 3, 4 units without any problem. And if you have a separate timecode in, either timecode can be a separate LTC timecode that is fed in, or it could be vertical interval timecode, or it could be a component in the reference tri-level sync. So depends on where you're injecting the timecode. But yeah, if you get them all locked together on timecode, I don't know if the ATEM units are designed to pull timecode in off of their reference input or not. I can't remember.
Yeah, mostly we're talking about timekeeping for video signals when we're discussing reference sync, black burst, the rest of the things that are traditional to the engineering side of broadcast television. What's critical is that all the cameras or all the sources start their frames at the same time, and that's what black burst was all about. There is vertical interval information and then line 1 of the actual picture. If you're mixing multiple cameras, that line 1 has to start synchronized. The only thing I ever worry about is if I'm looping things in a complex circumstance, you don't want there to be any lag as one passes to the other, such that in the end, what we used to call frame shakers or something, it's going to eventually line up all the slightly out of sync signals, that doesn't cause a bit of delay in there. So timing is important, and it can be worth spending a little time to be careful and get right if you're doing multiple sources, multiple cameras, or distribution throughout a facility where one source studio has to feed another switcher somewhere else. Things really should arrive at exactly the same time. Timing is important in all of this stuff. Next question.
Next one comes in from Brian Taylor in Washington, D.C. Brian asks, currently using Bridge to tag files and then CatDV to read the bridge tags to create a spreadsheet to submit to the NARA. There is a Bridge third-party plugin for this purpose, but is there a better all-in-one solution?
Mark Giuliani, do you know?
So to submit things to the National Archives and Records Administration, you may want to try doing a search on axel.ai, Axel, but with a different spelling, axel.ai, which has a product that does what you're trying to do as an all-in-one.
Oh, well, there you go. Hopefully that's a good solution for you, Brian. Thank you for the question. Let's go to the next question.
Coming in from Florida and Bradenton, Chris Dolan asks, how can someone find the various live videos coming out of NAB from the many vendors and journalists? Is there a piece of software that can auto-populate live streams based on hashtags?
Ronnie Hofsoy, have you found one?
No, I haven't. I'm using the old version of searching. But I've started to see that some of the AI tools are getting more and more clever to try to find newer and newer information. I've tested this with Perplexity in the few last days, and it seems to be kind of focusing and understanding that I would like to watch videos that are really, really new. And it also sources text articles, and I recently also tried to get it to search social media, which it's actually done, and try to evaluate which one is the most informative and relevant for me and my search. So I think there is a combination of old school searching and watching your vendors of choice and using new technologies. But I haven't seen a single item. Of course, you can look at the news feed from NAB, which is updated regularly, and you can also be a part of their email information system. So in the app, you can, of course, choose which vendors to follow and have information coming that way. But yeah, that's how I do it.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, I was going to mention coordinating all the live views that are from independent exhibitors there might be a little problematic because they may not be sharing their schedule with NAB itself. So usually what NAB does is they have a live stage at the venue where they bring a bunch of people on. You can schedule to talk about your product, come onto their little NAB broadcast stage, which they stream over NAB events. So if you go to the NAB webpage for the NAB convention for this year, make sure, and a lot of them are there for previous years, so make sure you type in 2025 and find the live from the show broadcast that the NAB is doing, and you might see sessions or segments from that live stage with whoever is an exhibitor you're interested in seeing. They may have booked time and booked an interview on the live events stage from NAB. So that's one of the best ways to get them in one place. Other than that, you'll have to go to the individual vendors that you're interested in and see if they're doing any live broadcasting. Because it's so difficult to broadcast from the show floor, unless they've set that up ahead of time and have a studio on the location to broadcast, it's going to be problematic getting a signal out, as we've seen trying to do our walk and talks, which, this year has been pretty good. But most people, because of we're kind of doing a guerrilla type broadcast. If you use the proper channels there, it can cost a whole lot of money for the bandwidth from the floor.
Yeah, I'm going to support all that. It is a complicated thing. Having been deeply involved in it last year and peripherally this year, I can tell you it's a ton of work. If we'd had to put a price on what we did last year in our coverage over the course of multiple days from NAB, it would have been tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for the engineering talent and the volunteers that we had out there on the show floor and every place else. It's a complex thing. And then the infrastructure issues of connection, bandwidth, trying to avoid dropouts and things like that. It was constantly a lot of people working very hard to try to get a decent signal out that was consistent and that people could depend on. And if you're going to promise that in your marketing, if you're going to say we're coming to you live from NAB, regardless of who you are, whether you're an organization like ours that's mostly volunteers or you're a commercial broadcaster who wants to turn this into content that people can subscribe to or something else, there's a lot of technical hurdles to get over. And remember, you got to build it for the 4 days of NAB and then shut it down. So it becomes an event kind of like a mini Olympics where this thing creates itself. You want to cover it really well, and then you're going to tear it all down and put all the stuff in somewhere else until it comes around the next year. Not an easy lift. Next question.
Comes in from Cape Town, South Africa. Hasmut Gaijar asks, we are recording academic presentations and also produce podcasts. Our camera is a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K and are wondering which tool for post-production edits, DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut? He watched the Ripple YouTube on the new features of Resolve 20 and, wow, was impressed.
Jesse Kester, start us out.
If you have some familiarity with either piece of software already, I would go with that one. If you're going into either or with no knowledge, I would perhaps consider going into Resolve, and there's a reason for that. The delta between the two might not seem that great right now if you're just taking a single camera and trimming out a bit here and there from a 1 hour academic broadcast. But as you start to introduce a second camera and a third camera and the ATEM ISO and this little bit and that little bob, all made by Blackmagic, Resolve will start to reveal a lot of features and a lot of integration tools that you won't have access to if you're locked into Final Cut.
Ronnie Hofsoy.
Well, I think as a person using everything from software that actually rewind and forwarded tape machines to Vegas and back in the old days, and moving on to Final Cut when still at version 7, then moved up to 10 or the X one, and using that for a lot of years together with Motion, etc. I've never been a fan of Premiere, so that's out of my evaluation anyway. And if we look a few years back when we were evaluating all these different types of NLEs or editors, we kind of was thinking of, let's look what Blackmagic is doing with the DaVinci Resolve, and we used it already for color correcting and was very happy with that. And when they also got hold of the audio guys in Fairlight, we thought that maybe they are onto something. And these last years, I've been like, I'm comparing Blackmagic to like a squirrel on double espressos. They are moving so much faster than anyone else in the industry. So we decided 2 years back that we will go all in DaVinci, and we have never looked back. So if you're going to, as Jesse said, if you're going to learn something new, you might as well learn DaVinci because that is a really, really good application.
Great tool. I'm hoping this gets simpler rather than complex because the human capital is going to be your most important here. It's not the tool you're using. It's whether you have a person or a small team of people who really understand the tools. I'm just going to say this from the point of view of somebody who was a Final Cut editor in the old days. When Final Cut 10 came out, I had to relearn it. It took me 2 to 3 years to feel like I understood that software well enough to call myself at least a semi-pro on it, let alone a professional. I think they're all that complex. And I'm hoping that they continue to work on simplifying things, because the idea of structuring content for the world shouldn't be that complex. And there are plenty of things in Final Cut, and that's where I edit, that I would never employ. I mean, there's just lots of stuff built into it, like roles and yes, it's multicam feature, and Premiere has one, and Resolve has one. Those things might be the right place to start. But if you're not doing a live cut, maybe they're not. I'm literally more excited myself about little things like Final Cut for iPad, because the idea of getting easily accessible phones and doing a multicam live switch on an iPad with a couple of phones attached to it just seems to me it's simplified. And that's what I want going forward. I don't want to have to learn another gigantic suite of software, and more than learning it, have to train people on how to use it, because there's so much depth to these big tools. That's why I'm slightly interested in CapCut. I understand the whole ownership things like that, but a lot of young YouTube creators are getting really good results out of software like that is not the old monolithic, huge suites that try to do everything for professional editors and amateurs. So that's my 2 cents. I'm looking at targeted stuff and paying attention to what the young YouTubers and things like that are using, because they don't have this weight of technological history behind them that tells them that they have to use the editor that somebody else used who they respect. They should find their own editor and make sure that it can grow with them. And that's my thinking these days. Next question.
Next one comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. He says, I want to upgrade my NVIDIA card from a 1050. This is for live streaming and recording multiple NDI or SDI feeds and general video processing. What model should I go with?
Courtney Gooden?
Well, if you have the money and have the room inside your PC, I would suggest to go with the top of the line right now is RTX 5090, which is, a great video card. Of course, for ingesting SDI feeds, you're going to probably have to have a Blackmagic card of some sort in there or something to bring those SDI in. And whatever software that you're going to be using for streaming, make sure it supports the GeForce NVIDIA drivers. But since you're using a 1050 now, you probably are using hardware encoding of that 1050 card, so it'll be even faster on 5090. And they base start at around $2,000, and they go up depending upon whether you get a third-party RTX card from Asus or one of the other board manufacturers out there that use the NVIDIA chipsets. They can go up from there depending upon what kind of speed and onboard RAM it has, video RAM that it has. So starts at about $2,000. So if you can afford that, go for it.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana asks, from their website, NAB Show has evolved to embrace artificial intelligence, the creator economy, sports, and streaming, reshaping how content is produced and consumed. Why no mention of broadcasting? And he has a link to nabshow.com.
Jesse Kester.
Well, not to be a didact, but cast means to cause light to appear on a surface or to cause shadow to appear on a surface, and broad means to do that a lot. So I would argue that NAB is still very, very focused on broadcasting, just that broadcasting has changed a lot in the last 10 years. If you're talking about network broadcasting, the value curve has almost become a straight line downwards. And if you're talking about streaming and online broadcasting, that's become pretty much a straight line upwards. So it's still broadcasting. It's just a different source of the media and a different destination. Courtney?
Yeah, and we're kind of stuck in the doldrums of standards right now of adopting ATSC3 for broadcasting. And that's been a very slow slog getting everybody together because it's so capable and because it uses over-the-top signals and network-based signals. And there's different channels of ATSC3 for portable broadcast, broadcast to portable devices, and that's a different segment. It's so stratified that it is moving at a glacial rate of acceptance among the television broadcasters that are out there and radio broadcasters that are out, well, radio not necessarily, but television broadcasters that are adopting ATSC3 broadcast. And as well as the receivers out there, the television sets have to incorporate next-gen receivers, which is how they've chosen to brand ATSC3 as next-gen TV. So check to see if your TV has a next-gen receiver, and it doesn't necessarily give you higher resolution content because mostly they're still broadcasting in 1080p, but it gives you additional features that come in as packetized information rather than just analog broadcast over the air. So it's been a slow go, and AI really doesn't have too much to do with that kind of stuff. It's mainly talking about delivery of a signal, and AI really won't help that out too much, I don't believe.
Sorry, I was reading something on the side. A lot of good information in the chat today, as always. If you're not on the chat, you probably should at least check it out, because there's a lot of things going on. They're talking about a lot of the information that Mickey is putting into the chat on some of these questions, and you can learn a lot just by being a part of that. So let's go on to the next question while I reorient myself here. We're live.
Okay, coming in from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. He says Blackmagic Cloud Backup 8 is a 1U rack mount hard disk dock with 8 independent 3.5-inch SATA bays, 4 10 gigabit Ethernet ports, Blackmagic Cloud Sync capabilities, and an HDMI monitor output for live storage status. Does the $14.95 unit beat a Synology NAS for storage?
Ronnie Hofsoy has an opinion. Ronnie?
Yeah, so it depends. If you're primarily needing a product for media management, editing, and are deep into the Blackmagic type of technology, of course, this unit will help you a lot on your way. But a Synology or a QNAP and other NASs are different type of products. They can do a lot of other stuff as well. They are also most of them, I would say, is RAID capable, which the Blackmagic storage solution is not at the moment. We never know what comes in future upgrades from Blackmagic. They are known for upgrading functionality as time goes by and people are inputting needs, etc. So we never know what will be happening there. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't know that these Blackmagic products are RAID compatible. What else is possible on the NAS like QNAP and Synology is they have a lot of other type of applications you can run on them. They are basically computers, not the most powerful ones, but they have a plethora of functionality that you can install, everything from database systems to calendar systems to media player to almost everything you can think of as an application is possible to install in these. And it's also called Docker, some of these technologies. So NASs, modern NASs are most seen as a functionality of mostly like an operating system that can run a lot of stuff, but the Blackmagic one is basically focused on one thing. And who knows, maybe it's really good at that. And if you are into that type of products from Blackmagic, you probably would have to look closer at those type of things.
Yeah, there's a lot in chat about this. I'm not going to read them all out to you, but this is one day where if you're not in the chat, you're missing a lot of things. What could possibly go wrong? Mickey McAchore has a few opinions that are pretty strong about their storage solutions, including these are like little tykes based on recent experiences with them. Some people love them. Some people do not love them. So just continue to gather information, listen to a lot of informed voices, and maybe you would want to join the chat today just to see some of the people who said, David Brady has said, let me show you my Drobo. Traditional things that have come out, and everybody said, this is going to be the next great thing, and the Drobos were one that over the course of a year or two, we saw it go from, wow, this is going to be really cool, to why in the world would anybody want to buy that? So, Ronnie, you wanted to come back in with another comment?
Yeah, for now I'm looking at the Blackmagic product as a nice rack-mountable disk docker, nothing more.
There. Okay. Let's go on to our next question.
Next question comes in from New York City, and David Brady says, for the systems integrator, how useful would an AI-driven diagramming solution be? And he has a link to the X10AV product.
AI-driven diagramming solution. Interesting. Jesse Kester, your thoughts? Did you look at this?
I did. A writer is only as good as their editor. These AI diagramming tools are only as good as the person who actually does the thing and knows how to implement implement diagrams correctly. So a real human being can identify mistakes and problems in these AI-generated diagrams that the black box might not be aware of. A lot of stuff doesn't really work when you get out into the real world, and you have to know how to kind of like hatchet things together in ways that manuals won't explain, and therefore these AI tools won't really understand. Useful, it will expedite the generation, but it will not be the final word on building diagrams and implementing them in the real world.
Courtney?
I just briefly had a chance to look at this. This kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call it AI. I'm not sure how they're using AI. This kind of technology existed 20 years ago in PC board layout for circuitry. You can take a look. This one also, though, besides just wiring diagrams and inputs and outputs of different equipment, also includes layout of your floor plan. So maybe it can also do, it says AI-powered search sense. I don't know what that is. They coined some phrase there. But maybe it can figure out, what cables have to run between different locations in your venue and how much to order to interconnect this stuff in remote parts of a facility. So, that might be useful besides just, the goes intos and goes outos, connecting those together to see, to make sure so that you can see where your signal routing is going. And it may create wire lists of what types of connectors you need, what types of wires you need, and how long they need to be, et cetera.
Ronnie Hofsoy.
Yeah, a friend of the channel also have a different approach. If you want to manually create this, you have Here to Record. It has a net application called Here2R Gear, which we tend to use sometimes just to visualize the cabling types and cabling between items. And so that's another way to go if you are not trusting AI.
Yeah, in the chat, a lot of people are saying, well, I want to explore that and see what it's like. We're hoping that, this is one of those utility tasks that utility AI can help with, but everybody's saying, I haven't seen it yet. Let me take a look and see. You'll get some opinions here as people investigate more. Next question.
Next one comes in from Lexington, South Carolina. Chris Fonte asks, I keep hearing join us in after hours. What does that mean and how?
So I told you earlier, if you follow to officehours.global/join, you will see a lot of resources that the show has assembled. One of them is after hours. You think this show happens only Pacific Coast time between 7 and 8 in the morning. Actually, there is a version of this panel chat that happens 24/7 and has been going for a long time. At first, if you go to afterhours.global, I think is the link. Somebody will put a link in there and I'll be able to read it off. But if you go to After Hours, you will probably find a kind of an empty room style website. You'll see little boxes with nobody in them. If you just say hello, you will be surprised that many of our regulars, kind of watch After Hours 24/7 while they're at work and stuff like that. And if somebody says hello, you'll get someone else to pop on, and sometimes 2 or 3 people to pop on. A lot of our most technically competent people kind of hang out there. Here's the link for you. It's officehours.global/schedule. And at the top, there's a link to After Hours. And it kind of, you can think of it as the water cooler for office hours. People hang out there, and if you come up with a question, if you're having a problem, here's how many people use it. I can't figure out how to make this thing work. They'll pop into After Hours. They'll pose the question after saying hello, and whoever's around in our tech capable crew will sometimes find, that's an interesting problem. Let's see if we can work it out together. And 2 or 3 people may pop in. They may say, let me go doing some research and get back to you with a solution to that. It is really, I think, if this was a tech company, it would be the water cooler that everybody hangs out in. When you walk up and there's nobody there, people will notice that you're there and they'll sneak over and help you solve problems. It is a great service. And it is one room of many in the after hours process people can gather in a group and say, we all want to work on this problem, and they'll go off to another room, a private kind of space, and work the problem out. So it's an incredible resource if you're part of the Office Hours family, and I highly suggest you check it out and see what's happening over there. All right, next question.
All right, from Marty Dickinson in Fairfield, Connecticut. Fantastic Office Hours coverage of the NAB show. You showed some of the audio rigs. Can you show us what were the camera rigs you were using at the NAB close-up? Thanks.
I'm not sure. There are people still out there. Alex, who was doing the first day's stuff and who was the leader of the Office Hours community, he started this show, unfortunately had a really tight schedule in NAB, so he was there on Sunday, he had to leave, and he's no longer there. But CJ and others from our community, Jeff Keithley and things like that, are there. And they're kind of popping up and doing ad hoc coverage from either the show floor, if they can get bandwidth out, or from events happening around, like the after hours or the extra hours presentation they did last night. You can find that on YouTube and see what they were doing. They were discussing what they had seen on the show floor and the rest of that. Whether CJ can get bandwidth out now or somebody else from our kind of family can get bandwidth out and do anything live, that's questionable. You can, by the way, help if you want to go to the Office Hours global/donate or things like that. One of the reasons that we're always constrained as to the coverage we can do is that it takes a lot of time and effort. People volunteer a lot of time, but sometimes, it's a matter of saying, can I really take $1,000 out of my budget and go spend the week at NAB trying to do this for our community, but knowing that there's no back end income from it. This is a volunteer organization. So anything you do in terms of donating or helping with the show allows us to do more. Courtney, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, if you're going to be watching it after hours, try and sign up for the notifications, push notifications, because that's the only way you're going to be able to know when somebody might be transmitting from the field. And we have been enabling Makana during those more formal sessions from this year's NAB. So you can, if you see them broadcasting from the floor, see if Makana, the main Makana stream is up. And if it is, then you can pop in there and ask your questions, because a lot of times they're monitoring the chat. So just enter your questions in the chat and ask to see the camera rig that they're showing, and maybe they will give you a look at it. It's hard to show a camera rig from the camera itself. You kind of need a second camera to do that.
Mirrors.
Yeah,
you got to use mirrors.
You can bring a hand mirror from the hotel.
CJ, by the way, said part of this is our test bed. We go to these shows and we try to figure out, okay, let's hammer on the way to cover a show and see if we can figure out something. Alex had the Blackmagic 12K, a DPA 5100 5.1 surround system. We're really pushing the outer edges. That's part of what we love doing here at Office Hours, and it's part of why we do this, is so we can, in a place where there's not money on the line, you're not working for a client where failure would be a disaster, you can go out and say, wow, I learned a lot when I was on the floor at NAB last year. I learned that taking 2 steps to the right killed the camera feed because of a video wall next to me, and 2 steps to the left cleared it up, and I was back on the air. Where else are you going to learn that kind of real-world issue unless you go out and experiment with things? And in some sense, Office Hours from the beginning has been one large experiment trying to learn how to do this stuff as well as we can. All right, I'm running over, and I shouldn't. Thank you, back-end crew, for being so generous with your time, but we're going to wrap things up now. Our 3 constituencies, those of you who watch the show, are producers, the people who ask the questions. Thank you so much for all of your questions, continuing to ask fabulous questions and doing a great job of that. For the panelists who show up here every day to answer questions, we could not make this show work without people volunteering their time and exposing themselves to the world and saying, here's my answer for that. If you disagree, go ahead and disagree with me. I always consider panelists to be a form of bravery, because there's, as I learned after writing a column for many years in a magazine, there's always somebody who will well, you didn't answer that quite right. So let me take issue with you. And you have to be tough enough to go, yeah, okay, let's discuss that. Or maybe you were right, or maybe I was right, and let me explain more. But anyway, panelists, thank you. And the back-end crew, people who you will never see. You'll see some of their names as the credits roll here, but that's just a small fraction of the number of people who help make this show possible every day. So to our back-end crew, our always gigantic thanks get delivered. The Telect Traversal today, if you were to had to go around and talk to the experts you've seen on the show today to get these answers, you would have traveled 32,000 miles. That's 51,000 kilometers, 251 million bananas for scale. We'll see you in after hours, and we'll see you tomorrow.
I use a version of AI called PAI, pseudo artificial intelligence.
Artificial semi-intelligence. That's great.
Not true AI, but pseudo AI. But it plays it on TV.
Oh, did he? Did he figure something out? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and as
I always bring my Airelo digital eSIM card. So if I need more bandwidth, I just add some gigabytes to it.
I'm really going to look closely at the attendance figure this year to see how they compared to last year. It takes about a week or two before they give you the final stats.